hey, how you doing? Your grandson want to talk to you. And he got on the phone with my son and held a 10-minute conversation with him. When he got back on the phone with me, he said, man, your daughter getting big. I said, I don't have any daughters. He said, you sure that's not your daughter? I just told you I don't have any daughters. I said, you know who you're talking to? He said, sure. This is Lil Hollis. I said, yeah. I don't have sons. I said, I don't have daughters. I have all sons. And he sit back, he said, man, but your number came up as your brother's. I said, but what that have to do with my voice and my son's voice? And I haven't talked to my daddy since. Now, a week ago, somebody enticed me to call my daddy. I said, no, I refuse to call him. And it's not that I have to be the bigger man, but sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone just to talk to someone that cares about you. I don't care if me and you never talk. And I don't care if my dad and I ever talk. But you have grandkids that would love to talk to you. Why you can't pick up the phone and call them? I reach out and talk to my son all the time. But that was a disappointing moment in my life that you feel that you haven't talked to your grandson and you can mistake your grandson, and my son talks just like a boy. And you can mistake him for your granddaughter?
Hey, how old was your son at the time?
He's 8 years old.
Oh, okay. I remember when I was a kid, people kept mistaking me for a girl until I, got a deeper voice. But...
Yeah, I can say that too.
Yeah, that happened to me all the time.
Yeah. What's worse is if they look at you and still think you're a girl, that's when it gets bad.
Yeah, that's not, that's not good.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Like, what you doing?
Oh, man.
So, what I've learned is sometimes in life, disappointment comes from family members. It comes from the world. How do we deal with it is the answer. And that's what we're going to talk about next, how to deal with it. I learned to move forward. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I reached back, I talked to my son, I instilled in him, how disappointment happens, why sometimes disappointment happens. And, one of the panelists just said just a few minutes ago, what is the lesson in it? Because there's a lesson in everything that we go through.
Absolutely. I think your points are well made. A couple of them I wanted to reiterate because your story was compelling. One of the points that I think you talked about initially was when you have a setback, being able to relate something from that story and to help guide others with it. So the fact that you had a setback was the precursor for you being able to teach your son a lesson about life. The fact that you had an opportunity to teach him that lesson because you guys both went through it together likely drew you closer because of the way you handled it. The second thing is dealing with disappointment in expectation of behavior. What you shared as your second disappointment really relates to your expectation. Your expectation is that a father should want to have an intimate knowledge of all of his offspring, not just his sons and daughters, but grandsons and daughters. And if he's privileged enough to have great grandsons and daughters, that might also be something you would hope he would aspire to. The challenge is that when we have an expectation, sometimes disappointments come because the expectation isn't met and the person who is not meeting the expectation doesn't know you have it. So there could be a legitimate gap between what they do and what you would expect for them to do, but they have no idea. I remember the statement, disappointment sets in when reality doesn't meet expectation. And I think when the reality of what we would all hope for, someone to be, when they aren't that, it's very difficult for us to try to to try to manage the emotions that are associated with that disappointment. I would say definitely consider longer how you address it. There may be some other issues going on that might, cognitive issues, early onset cognitive issues that may influence some of those outcomes, and it may not be something that your father can control. Just an observation or an emerging stroke, that could also be a problem. Too, vasculopathies sometimes people having strokes can get things confused, and if they've had hypertension for a while, it can cause them to not really, they can say some pretty crazy stuff. But anyhow, that's just another brief aside. So maybe don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe look into that a little bit more because that sounds like a cognitive issue. But I wanted to share a story also because we're going around the circle and I have so many opportunities for setbacks. It's hard to know which one to pick. So, so I'm going to pick something that was a little older in my life that happened a number of years ago when I was on the East Coast. And I had just purchased a practice from a doctor that I was working with, and I was really excited about starting this whole process. And I had the professional side, but I didn't have the other side of it. I happened to work on eyes, and I wanted to have a full practice, so I was looking at purchasing the other side of it. In the process, the negotiations broke down, and the company that I was negotiating with decided to take an antagonistic approach and attempt to take the records and things that I bought from the previous doctor, say that they were theirs, and then proceed to lock me out of my office. They then replaced me and put another doctor in there, all breaching a contract. They put another doctor in the space, and what ended up happening was that that doctor attacked me, and the company attacked me, and they sent patients to attack me. So I had a series of rather unfortunate legal battles that I had to address. And I have to tell you, when my kid's mom was 2 weeks pregnant when I found out that we were not going to have a place for me to work. And, we hadn't been married, but for probably 9 months at the time. So, we were still emerging as a married couple less than a year in. And all of a sudden we have this catastrophic thing where all of a sudden I find myself, instead of in a nice cushy position, I'm all of a sudden without a job. And I remember thinking that this was the most difficult, it's your worst nightmare come true, which is every man wants to make sure that he has resources when the time comes to provide for your offspring. So each day I was watching my kid's mom get bigger and bigger and bigger. And she kept saying, you got to find something, you got to find something. And I remember, praying, and nothing happened. And I was really upset. I kept saying, God, you shouldn't have let this happen. And clearly I need work. I tried going to work at music stores. Some of you guys know that I'm a musician. I tried working, selling musical instruments. I tried doing some manual labor, and it was just really a rough time to try to get a job. So it was rough. It was very, very difficult. And each day she kept getting bigger and bigger and saying, I don't know what you're going to do, but I can't work, and I need you to provide something. You need to pray. And I tell you, each day I was on my knees and I was praying, and finally, God said, just build your own. And I remember thinking, God, I don't know. I just don't really have what I need right now. I'm in the middle of lawsuits, and I'm in the middle of legal battles, and in the middle of all kinds of terrible things. And this is the worst possible scenario. And each day I'm sitting here in this house trying to find ways to provide. All of our savings was gone. All of our resources were drying up. And literally from July all the way to December, I guess it was May all the way to December, I couldn't find work. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't. And each day I devoted to building my new office, whatever that was going to be. And I kept praying and hoping, and nothing was, banks were turning me down, and it was heavy. It was a heavy load to carry. And finally, just about a week before my son was to be born, I got one of my old sub jobs. I used to work as a locum tenens doc, and I would fill in different places when I was a single guy. And one of the old places said, hey, do you want to have some part-time work? And I think I had 2 or 3 days, and it was enough to be able to stay in an extended stay hotel, and they would pay for it. So we became homeless. We were living in the basement of some friends' homes, and while trying to build back and fight these, pay these attorneys to fight these legal things. And in the midst of that experience, the attorneys that were representing us said, hey, I think we've got a really good case. We should sue these guys and we'll win. And I heard God say, don't sue. Now you have to imagine when you are financially destitute and you are in the midst of trying to feed your family and you have no work, to hear a voice say, don't sue, it's like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to feed my folks? How am I going to live? And, I heard it was clear as day. And I mean, it was clear. And turns out it was because God was going to provide for us. And I watched from May all the way to December. I watched God send people to our door to bring us food. I watched God provide us furniture. Every time I got down on my knees and prayed, I had no money, but I watched God open doors. And I remember seeing God each and every day answer a prayer specifically that I prayed that had to have a real, not prayers like, Lord, help my day go better. No, these were, Lord, we need diapers. These were, Lord, we need baby clothes. Lord, we need a dresser and a playpen to put this kid in. Lord, we need furniture. Those kind of prayers. And I watched God open doors one right after another, right after another, right after another. And during the hardest and most difficult time of my life, I watched God make provision. And here's the end all to say all. At the end, the doctor who attacked me and the patients who attacked me and the company that attacked me, all of them ended up creating an opportunity that protected me. And here's what I mean. The state had a law that said that you couldn't practice in certain kinds of locations. And apparently the location I didn't know that I bought violated that new statute that had been implemented. And apparently that location was under investigation by the state board for violating certain codes. And the fact is that when the door closed and I got kicked out of that place, literally the next person who went into that job lost their practice license and had to leave the state. And then the state launched a probe into the company that harmed me. And then the third thing was, right after that, the insurance companies that most of the patients that I saw were covered under switched to another plan, which I happened to have been the sole provider for. So I never lost a single patient and I never had to step into court. And here's the point. When we look at these circumstances, we also have to look at the hand of God, demonstrating that he's willing to work through those things and to teach us lessons in faith. So when we get these disappointments, they don't feel necessarily all that great. They don't give us the warm fuzzies when we think about our relationship with God. But just like Nola and his son, those difficulties come to draw you closer. They come to give you the opportunity to look at things from a different perspective and to see the hand of God working in your life in unique ways where you can't work it yourself. And I think that's when you have dependence upon God, when there are things that are outside of your control. And you realize that God is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think. So this has been Conversations from the Cave. I'm your host, Kirk Kennedy. We've been talking about despair. We know that despair comes to us all and challenges come to us all, but have hope because we know that faith carries us through, persistence carries us through, determination carries us through, and don't let the things that most people think is weaknesses be weaknesses. They are your strengths and embrace them. Those are the lessons from our show today. Next time, join us on Sundays. Also check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, and Facebook to be able to hear our shows. Subscribe. And if you have any comments or questions about our shows, please be sure to reach out to us through our normal social media outlets. Finally, we ask that you would share the podcast with your friends and family so that we can continue to grow and that more people can hear the good news of the things that we're sharing on this show. This has been Conversations from the Cave. I'm your host, Kirk Kennedy. See you next time.
Conversations from the Cave is brought to you by the Alabama Cornea Care Center, Northern Alabama's first irregular cornea, keratoconus, and scleral lens referral center, specializing in the management of degenerative cornea disease and complications resulting from refractive surgery. For more information, you may visit them on the web at alabamacorneacare.com. The Alabama Cornea Care Center, helping patients see the light of the world. Conversations from the Cave is a production of the Provox Media Group. For more information or to share your questions or comments, visit our podcast Facebook page by searching Conversations from the Cave. The views expressed on this program are the personal beliefs of the panelists and do not necessarily represent the beliefs of the Provox Media Group or its sponsors. Join us next time for more real talk from real men. Conversations from the Cave.